Okay, hi, my name is Dr. Solet, and I'm a cardiologist for the Cardiovascular Institute of the South, and I am from the Grand Calumet-Dulac area. I have the Cardiovascular Institute of the South office over at Morgan City, and it is my pleasure to be here tonight. Well, it was my pleasure to be here tonight to actually field some questions and to talk to the folks here about the COVID-19 infection and also vaccinations. So for the vaccine, after about 3 weeks or so after you've actually received the vaccine, you will begin to produce a sufficient number of antibodies where you will have very good protection against exposure to the virus.
That's the first one? Like after your first shot?
After the second one.
Okay.
After the second one, yeah.
How long does it last? And we heard like on TV,
Yep.
we might have to have a booster.
Maybe.
Now,
Yeah, and so the reason, and so some folks are wondering, so why would I need to get a booster? Well, I mean, why do you need to get a second, why do you need to get the pneumonia shot every year? Okay, or not, I'm sorry, not pneumonia
The
every year.
flu.
The flu, why do you need to get the influenza vaccine, every year? Is because things change, okay? And so right now, we're not quite sure, but I mean, it would be no different than having to get, another flu shot, okay, every year. Or if the SARS-CoV-2, if it changes and there are lots of variants and it begins to mutate and things like that, well then yes, I mean, we may need to get another, SARS-CoV-2 vaccine, sometime next year. So that is a possibility.
What's the difference between the COVID and the SARS?
I'm sorry. So let me explain that. So SARS-CoV-2 is the name of the virus. COVID-19 is the name of the disease.
Oh,
Okay, I should have explained that in the beginning.
I didn't know.
Okay. No, that's okay. No, that's good. But yeah, so because there's SARS-CoV-2,
Yeah.
and so yeah, that is the virus. That is the actual name of the virus that causes COVID-19.
so if you take the vaccine, then next year you would have to take it again because
Maybe.
maybe because it's like the flu. You have to
Right.
take the flu shot every year.
Right, but if you think about, there are other viruses that are similar to SARS-CoV-2, okay, that we've actually had, over the past 20 years. Okay, there was one called MERS, which was a Mediterranean version of the virus, and of course we have SARS-CoV-2, well, there was SARS-CoV-1, okay, at some point in the past, and so those viruses, I mean, we're not being vaccinated against those. Okay, because they're gone. Okay, our bodies have had an opportunity to fight it off, and it never really changed to any significant degree where it could actually perpetuate and come back again. So there are other SARS viruses from the past that we don't even have to worry about anymore. So for this particular virus, is this something we're going to have to, get vaccinated for? What, maybe later on this year, maybe once more next year? And then, 5 years from now, it's going to be, oh my gosh, you remember that virus from 5 years ago where everybody was like all this hoopla, and look where we are now. We don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Chances are very good that's probably what will happen. But, it's one of those things where, I mean, I tell my patients this all the time. They want to know how long they're going to live or something like that. So I didn't bring in my crystal ball today. Or there's a smudge in that little spot where it talks about you. So we may not know. We may not know. At this point, we're not quite sure. We'll just have to wait and see.
Also, let's say I have a son-in-law that has a mechanical valve.
Yeah.
And would it be recommended that, he has it, he gets the
vaccine. Yeah. So her question is, her son, it was your son, you said? Yeah.
My son-in-law.
Your son-in-law. Yeah. Your son-in-law has a mechanical valve, and the question is whether or not he should get the vaccine. The answer is absolutely yes. Yeah.
And his immune system is real,
Is it good right now?
no, well, he,
Yeah.
like when he had a surgery, his name is Ronnie.
Okay.
And he's married to Katina, and like when he had the first surgery, open heart surgery,
Mhm.
they did the mechanical valve
Yeah.
in the morning. In the afternoon, they had to open him up. He
Oh,
was
wow.
hemorrhaging, and
Yeah.
and then he had a colonoscopy, the bag, and he had to have that reversed, and it seems like every time he goes through a surgery, it's two times,
Right. Right.
So I was just, I guess, he didn't get it yet, but I guess his doctor's gonna refer him,
Right. And that's the thing. I mean, people don't have to be referred for the vaccination. I mean, you can go to some family doctor clinics who actually have them. Lots of the hospitals have them. You can actually go on to the Louisiana Health Department website, and there's a number you can call as a website you can check onto as well, and it will tell you exactly where you can go and get the vaccine. One of the problems we're seeing right now, in fact, we had this issue over in Morgan City at Oxford St. Mary, where they had 25 doses they called our clinic, it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon, they had 25 doses that were going to expire at the end of the day. And if they didn't have anyone go and get those vaccines, they would have to throw them away. And so we had patients were coming in the afternoon, and I'm asking, so did you get your vaccine? No. Oh, they can do it right now. Go across the street right now. They can do it right now.
Yeah.
So it's a safe vaccine. I mean, it really, really is. So now, while we're talking about safety for the vaccines, I think it would behoove us to talk about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, okay? Because there was a pause on the distribution of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine because there were, several people who actually developed blood clots because of they believe because of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Now, keep in mind that there were approximately 7 million or so doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that were actually administered. And there were seven people, okay, who were adversely impacted by the vaccine. So that's 1 in a million, okay? 1 in a million. I mean, I think, you're probably at a much higher risk of actually getting into a very bad accident just driving on your way to get the vaccine than you are at actually having an adverse reaction to the vaccine, okay? So keep that in mind. I mean, the media will hype up, and I guarantee you, now that they've actually begun to re-administer the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, you are going to hear about every single person who has an adverse event related to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. It doesn't matter how big or how small the reaction is, you're going to hear about it, okay? You're going to hear about it. So, yes, sir.
So I've heard a lot of community concerns about side effects.
Yeah.
Sending out surveys, and a lot of people already have an underlying condition. So the side effects that they're hearing from the community, especially from the second vaccine, it's really scaring them.
Okay.
So what can we say to people who are scared of those side effects, and are the side effects, could they potentially be deadly to someone who has those underlying conditions?
It'll be very, 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 very unlikely for someone to die from administration of these vaccines. Okay, I can't put enough varies on there to say how unlikely it is for it to happen. Okay, I would say yes, ma'am.
What do you think about our youngest son? What? Okay, let me take this off. Our youngest son had a bacteria that attacked his heart.
Okay.
It killed his heart, and his heart works only 25% right now.
Yep.
And just on the 13th of this month, he went, they had to put him a defibrillator and a pacemaker together.
Okay. Yep.
Well, on the 13th, they changed the thing, because it was time to change it.
Right.
And they told him he would need a heart transplant, but he
Okay.
refuses it.
Okay.
Because he said his chances to survive is so slim.
Okay.
So I asked him, I said, baby, did you take your vaccine for the coronavirus? He said, no, Mama, I'm not taking it because my chances of surviving is so slim.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I'm afraid. He said,
Right.
I live with the doctor, told me the doctor gave him 5 years to live.
Okay.
He done surpassed it up.
Right.
He said, I'd rather take my chances. What
Yeah.
do you think? He should take it, or
Absolutely, he should take the vaccine.
he should take it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because he
I mean,
lives in Texas.
Yeah, because of his other underlying medical conditions, if he were to get COVID, it would almost certainly kill him.
It would kill him.
It could. He would be one of those people who are at higher risk of dying from COVID if he were to actually get it.
And then his wife, she lives 24 hours a day on the oxygen machine
Yeah.
because she has COPD.
She needs to get the vaccine as well.
She refuses it too.
Okay.
You know, and I told him, I said, look, your daddy has a defibrillator and a pacemaker,
Right.
and he took the vaccine, and he's there.
Yep. Yep.
So why don't you
True.
take the chance? He said,
Yeah.
no, Mama, Y'all agree?
Yeah, okay. But you were asking about the potential side effects, from the vaccine. So, I had COVID back in September, okay, and so I had to make a decision. I mean, I know just from my basic medical knowledge that I'm producing antibodies, and I will continue to produce antibodies for a considerable period of time. I was going to be doing a considerable amount of traveling in the beginning part of the year. And I thought, well, maybe I should go ahead and just get the vaccine because maybe it'll help expedite travel for me and help to eliminate some of those barriers that I might face either with the airlines or going to another country and so forth. And so I decided to go ahead and get the vaccine. And plus, I thought it'd be a good example to my patients and my community that, okay, I'm getting the vaccine even though I had COVID. And so I did. And I actually got the Pfizer. I had my first dose back in towards the end of December. And then, of course, my second dose was about 3 weeks later. And so, yes, my arm was a little sore. I had redness over the injection site that lasted for about 3 days. About 8 hours after I got the injection, I began to feel a little bit tired. I woke up the next morning and I was feeling a bit achy. Felt as though my temp was just maybe a little bit up. I checked my temperature and it was 99. I went to work. And somewhere around, I'd say 2 or 3 in the afternoon, I felt completely back to normal. Okay, so of course 3 weeks later, I got my second injection. Again, on my arm, it was red, but maybe for a day or so. I was a little bit sore at the injection site. That afternoon, again, started having a lot of the same symptoms, the same thing as before. The next morning, I woke up. I felt like I was more achy than I was the first time. And it probably persisted throughout the entire day, the next day, and then woke up the next morning feeling great, exercising, doing my regular routine, not really having any problems.
Was
So
that
that's
maybe because you had the COVID?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
So those are probably the most common
I did the
things.
same thing.
Yeah,
Oh.
so those are the most common things that we hear about, as far as potential side effects, from the vaccine. Is you'll get a little redness at the site, you feel a little achy, and you may feel a little bit run down, a little bit tired. Excuse me, but all of those symptoms, resolve. So those are the most common things that you actually hear,
Cause
from
I
folks.
took a Tylenol that
Yeah.
after I
Right.
took the shot.
Right. So
The-
I mean now.
After I went home and,
Yeah.
cause I had to wait in the parking lot at the
Yeah.
Civic Center.
Yeah. Now I mean these symptoms that I'm describing, that sound similar or familiar
Yes.
to all of you who have actually gotten the flu
Yeah.
vaccine.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot,
It
very
hurt it.
lot.
Didn't feel that.
Okay. See.
See, he didn't get.
Yeah, and
COVID.
I hear the same thing from other folks too, where they have patients who have
Now,
come in and
my
I talk to
second
them.
one,
Yeah.
That night, I felt tired.
Yeah.
And I took a Tylenol and I went to bed.
Yeah.
After I took a shower.
Yeah.
And the next morning I woke up and I was fine.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
got like really nauseous.
That's what
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
cause my brother, he took it
Mhm.
just a couple of weeks ago, and he
Right.
felt like.
But think
nauseated.
about this. Let's put all this into perspective. Okay, why are we getting the vaccine? Why are we getting the vaccine?
So we don't get COVID.
So you don't catch COVID and so you don't die.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody's worried about, oh my gosh, what if I get COVID? What if I get COVID? I mean,
Yeah.
what's the likelihood? What is the true mortality rate?
So you don't die.
Yeah, for those
When you
people,
catch it.
yeah, so for people who actually go ahead and get, actually contract the SARS-CoV-2 virus to cause COVID-19, what is the likelihood that they're actually going to die? Okay? I mean, it's a very, very,
Slim.
very small percentage, okay? Overall, if you take all comers, but again, remember, if you are, somewhere between the age of, newborn to 50 years old, your chances of actually dying are pretty small, okay? If you're over the age of 50, your chances begin to increase, and they increase with age. And they also increase with the number of comorbidities or the other illnesses that you may actually have. So why are we doing this? Why are we promoting the vaccine? I mean, because we're trying to save some lives here, okay? We're not giving a vaccine that's going to potentially kill somebody so that, what, people can then die? I mean, no, that just doesn't make any logical sense. I mean, it's a safe vaccine. I
But it's not
understand.
often like you said, that's when you said you got nauseated, well, my brother got nauseated, but that's
Yep.
all he had, just a little nauseated. And-
Exactly.
Yeah, I got like really
Yeah, but
achy,
look.
tired, and just nauseated.
Right.
Him,
So, yeah.
him, and him. No symptom at all.
No symptom.
No
Nothing.
symptoms at all.
Nothing.
Right, nothing, yeah.
So,
mhm.
okay, the Pfizer and the Moderna, you have to take 2 doses.
2 doses, right.
So why do Why, which one would, okay, and the Johnson & Johnson just one,
It's
so
just one.
is it a stronger?
It's the
Vaccine,
no,
or-
it has to do with the technology and how the vaccines were actually made. So the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine are based on this newer, cautious to say newer technology, because the technology for mRNA vaccines has probably been around, probably for about the last 8 to 10 years. Okay, so Moderna and Pfizer are based on it's an mRNA-based vaccine. Okay, whereas the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is technology based on an adenovirus. So essentially what they're doing is they're giving you, and I want to say inert, or they are actually giving you a virus that can't do you anything. So that's the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Okay, so they're actually, in the vaccine, the way that it works is they're actually giving you a virus, adenovirus, which is the same kind of virus that causes the common cold. But this vaccine and the virus they're giving you, it's kind of like a Trojan horse. Okay, familiar with the story of the Trojan horse, where what they did is they kind of hid all the military and the army kind of inside the horse, and then gave it to them as a gift. And when they all went to bed at night, they all broke out of the horse, and then they went ahead and destroyed the city. So the adenovirus is kind of like a Trojan horse. So what they're doing is, what they were able to do is they're able to get the part of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, okay, that our body would recognize. So it's almost like putting the name tag, okay, of the SARS-CoV-2, putting it inside this adenovirus, and they give it to you. Okay, so now what happens is, your antibodies and your immune system says, okay, I know this guy. So when SARS-CoV-2 comes infecting my body, I know exactly who he is, I know what he looks like, and I can destroy him because I've already built my army, and it's sitting in my immune system. So that when this virus comes lurking around my body, I'm ready for him, because I know exactly who he is, I know what he looks like. Okay,
Your body becomes a Trojan horse.
so to speak, yeah. Well, the Trojan horse was given to you so that you now have the army, so that you're ready to fight off this virus.
Right.
Okay. Now, you may hear a lot of talk about the different characteristics of the virus and what is it that kind of makes it unique. And so on the surface of this virus, there is a particular protein that sits on the virus, and that protein is what really it does make it unique, but it's also what allows our bodies, our immune system, and these vaccines to really help us fight off this virus by producing the antibodies that we need to.
So
Yeah.
which one would be better? The Moderna, Pfizer, or Johnson?
And that's a very good question. So right
That's what I
now,
was gonna ask
yeah.
too.
So based on what we know, so which one has the better track record? Okay. It looks as though, right now, based on what we know, it looks as though the Pfizer and Moderna have a better track record, because what you hear, more recently is that, there've been some problems with Johnson & Johnson. So the chances of something bad happening with the Johnson & Johnson virus is 1 in a million. Okay, 1 in a million. What's the likelihood of that happening to you if you were to get the virus? Well, it's 1 in a million. Okay, so if I had a casino and I had the opportunity to run my casino with chances of 1 in a million people winning, I'd run that casino all day long. Okay.
Wow.
All right, because the chances of actually, and so you turn that around, and for you, if you go and you say, okay, so what? There have been 1 million people who have had the vaccine so far, and nobody's had any problems with it. Oh, my number might be up, possibly. Okay, but again, it's always a little bit tricky to kind of talk about, playing the odds when it comes to something like this. Okay. Because what they've found is that the people who have actually the people who are more likely to have an adverse reaction to the Johnson & Johnson virus are people who actually have clotting or bleeding disorders already, and younger women. Yeah. So, but the CDC, the FDA would not have recommended opening it up again to allow people to get the Johnson & Johnson virus if they didn't feel as though the risk was acceptable. Okay, so. What I really want to encourage people to do is to keep the risk in perspective, okay? I can guarantee you that for every single one of us in this room, there are things that we do day in and day out, okay, that put our life at risk, day in and day out, that put our life at higher risk, exponentially higher risk than getting a vaccine.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
I mean, the mere fact that you're getting in a car every day, okay, and why haven't people stopped driving? Why haven't people stopped swimming? Okay, why haven't people stopped doing the things of everyday life? Why haven't people stopped smoking? Why haven't people stopped eating all these fatty foods? I mean, why haven't people stopped doing all these things if we're worried about the risk of dying or having a little bellyache? I mean, my goodness, people will go into the Mexican restaurant and indulge knowing that they're going to have reflux and upset stomach and all these other things the next morning. But
But I can tell you,
Yep.
when COVID started, it stopped us from, we wouldn't have dared went to a meeting like this. We
right.
couldn't.
No,
We
and
had to
you
stay home.
exactly, and you did the right thing because you were at higher. Because your population is at the highest risk.
Yeah.
By all means, you should quarantine and limit your exposure to other people. By all means, yeah.
So people with health issues, let's say asthma or lung disease, or they should take it regardless. right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, I took it, I had
Yeah.
pulmonary fibrosis of the lung,
Yeah,
and I took it, and it got me a little sore.
right.
That's about it. And him, it didn't even affect him.
Yep.
And he has, like I said, a defibrillator, a pacemaker, and
Mhm.
never bothered him.
Right. And so just to let you know, I mean, like I said, I had COVID back in September. And so 3 months later, September, October, about 3 months later, I had my first injection for the Pfizer vaccine. And I was curious. Well, I mean, am I still producing a sufficient number of antibodies at this point? Because you hear all of this debate and everything else that you hear in the media about, oh my goodness, after 72 days, your antibodies are gone. Well, that's nonsense. So I was curious. So after I actually, the morning that I actually received my first vaccine injection, I checked my antibodies, and sure enough, they were still sky high. So, but I got the vaccine anyway. Yes.
Would you think it's possible that a person would have caught it before they announced it?
Yes.
Like in February?
It is possible.
Because you can ask him, I was so sick
Yeah.
in January.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to bring me to the emergency room. I couldn't breathe, but I
Mhm.
went to bed and got under my machine.
Right. Right.
And I said, well, I got a doctor's appointment at 2:00. And I went, and the doctor told me, he said, you're lucky to be alive.
Yeah.
He said, you should have been in the hospital.
Yeah. So it is possible.
That hadn't come out yet,
Right.
the COVID.
Right,
It came out
right.
in February, huh?
Right.
And-
Right. But they think that
Yeah.
the first case has
It was
actually
February
arrived.
last
They think the first case has actually arrived in the U.S. somewhere between, late November, sometime in December. That's when they
But
estimated.
This was in January that
Yeah.
I felt so sick, that I was so sick. He gave me a breathing treatment in the office, 2 shots, and I had to go get a breathing machine with the medicine. That's how sick I was. Ask him.
But for us
He wanted to
here
bring me
in
to the emergency, and then I was starting to have chest pains and everything with it.
Yeah.
Said, no, I got a doctor's appointment after lunch.
Right.
Right.
I
Yeah,
thought I
another
was gonna
question?
die.
Yeah.
That's what I really thought I was
Yeah.
dying.
So I'm 25, and a lot of my friends were like around the similar age group, and a lot of them wanted to start families.
Mhm.
So a lot of them are scared because they've already had issues with fertility,
Mhm.
and a lot of their concerns is should they take with those complications if they're planning on getting pregnant? Should they take this vaccination?
Yeah, and so that's a very good question. And one of the things that I don't think there's enough evidence to support one way or the other is whether or not folks who are pregnant, whether or not the vaccine is actually safe in them. Because when they actually did the trial, there weren't pregnant women who were actually part of the trial. So we don't know how it would impact, a woman who is pregnant. I mean, my goodness, which pregnant woman would say, yeah, I'll volunteer for a vaccine that's brand new to see how it infects me? No, I mean, that most people would not do that. And now, for folks who are just thinking about, becoming, pregnant, I mean, I know there's been some question about whether or not there's infertility kind of associated with the vaccine. That has not been shown to be the case. Yeah. And so, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the little chip, the little microchip that everybody thinks that is in this vaccine and was being injected into everybody. So the bottom line is this. if you don't want to be tracked by the government or anybody else, okay, this is what you need to get rid of. Okay?
Amen.
Believe me, they know more about you from what is on your phone and the habits and everything that you do, more information from this, that even if they were, and they're not injecting everybody with some kind of a, tracker or something like that. I mean, my goodness, my life is so boring. What would they find out anyway in the first place?
I've been told that
Yeah.
they're like, I don't want to be a guinea pig. I was like, so you're calling me a guinea pig?
Right.
I said
But
that
what you need
too.
to, right, but what you need to understand is that, this mRNA technology that they're using for this vaccine, this has been around for about a decade, if not more. I mean, it's been researched for even longer than that, but it's been in
Yes.
practice for certain things.
Inject.
Yes, yeah, the mRNA technology that they're using for this
Okay.
vaccine. I mean, it's being used in, in cancer therapeutics and then, so forth, so. And then I have to also address the other issue is that, this is going to affect my DNA. It is not going to affect your DNA. This mRNA, your RNA and your DNA are two completely parts of your cell, okay? The mRNA does not have the ability to go in there and mess with your DNA. If it did, you would have, 100 million people who would be growing a third ear or something because they've received, the vaccine. This is not what we're seeing. Yeah.
So I took the vaccine because one thing that really scares me if I was to catch COVID, the long-term effects of COVID, because I know a couple people who have long-term effects now with their heart
Yeah.
and with asthma that they've never had before COVID.
Right.
So now with the vaccine, I've heard a lot of people, they're scared of the long-term effects once you get this vaccine.
Okay.
What are the odds of something happening long-term?
Next to nothing. Okay. Because what the vaccine is doing, the vaccine is helping you. Okay, the vaccine is actually helping you to produce antibodies so that it can actually fight off something that might kill you. Okay, that's what the vaccine is doing. I think it's that simple. Okay. And as I'm talking about this, and I'm kind of giving you these statistics about the people who are at highest risk. So, so if I'm 35 years old and I'm the picture of health, why should I get this vaccine? Okay, and part of the reason is that, you can still contract the virus, even though you don't die, even though you don't get very sick, you can still contract the virus and be asymptomatic and then pass it on to your grandmother, or pass it on to your friend's grandmother, or pass it on to other people who are at higher risk. And so, our goal is to achieve what's called herd immunity by making sure that everybody, or as many people as possible, actually are producing antibodies to this virus, so that if anybody is exposed, okay, we will be able to effectively fight off this virus and not get anyone else sick or ourselves. Yeah.
We had our final vaccination on January the 30th.
Yep.
Okay, so
You're
should
good.
Should
Yeah.
we like later on, like maybe August or September, get tested to see if we still with the antibodies?
That's really not necessary. No, that's really not necessary, because I think what we know is that, for the people who were as part of the trial, they're being tested even now to see how long their antibodies are at peak levels and when they're beginning to decline. For everyone, whether you've had a vaccine or whether or not you've actually been exposed to a particular virus, whether it's a flu or a SARS-CoV-2 virus, your antibodies will dwindle over time. Okay? And so the question now remains, what is the risk of you actually contracting the virus in August or December of this year, or, for that matter, December of next year? And I think we're still waiting to gather that information. Yeah.
And then more people, if they get vaccinated, it's gonna be less of a chance of,
Yes, exactly. And not only that, one of the other reasons to have everybody get vaccinated as soon as possible is so that it will reduce the risk of this virus actually mutating and forming, well, I throw that term around a little bit loosely because what you really want to do is you want to avoid the risk of actually having variants of this virus that are sustainable into the future, okay? And I was hesitant as to whether or not I kind of wanted to go down that route and talk about, you know, the virus and how it changes and everything like that. So one of the things you need to understand is that viruses are not very smart. Okay, so you have to figure that, you know, viruses, what do they have to do to survive? They have to replicate. So whether it's the flu virus, whether it's a bacteria that gets in your body, in order for it to survive, it has to replicate. Okay, now, if you think about the cells that make up your body, they are really, really good. Okay, for example, I mean, your blood cells, I mean, they have to be replaced, I mean, you know, every 90 days or so. Okay, and you know, if you have a problem, say a cancer that develops in your blood, well, that's because the replication process of those cells, it didn't go the way it was supposed to, and so then, you know, you develop a cancer. And that's the same thing with the other cells in your body. Your body has an absolutely remarkable and impeccable way to reproduce the cells. I mean, you know, the skin cells that you have on your skin right now, these are not the same ones you're born with. They're gone, long gone, and you reproduce them again and again and again. Okay, but I mean, your skin still works. It's still doing what it's supposed to do. Okay, it's repelling water, it's keeping you warm, and all of those things because it's still working. Okay, because your body has an absolutely impeccable check mechanism in place to make sure that your cells are continuing to be reproduced and are healthy. Okay, viruses are not so good. So if you've been exposed to whether it's the flu virus or the SARS-CoV-2 virus, from the moment that virus has entered your body, it begins to change, and it begins to replicate, and it begins to make mistakes. And so, you know, some of them will die off, but a lot of them will make it, and then some will die off, and a lot of them will make it, because as it replicates in your body, it's making lots and lots of mistakes as it tries to reproduce itself. Okay? Its photocopier is not very good. Okay? So that's why over time, what can happen is the virus, even though it will change, well, there are some of the copies that are like, oh, this makes me a little bit better. Oh, this makes me a little bit stronger. And so that's why you're hearing about these variants that are actually, you know, perpetuating or that have been successfully growing, and we've been finding these new variants in different parts of the country and different parts of the world. Okay? Now, just because the virus changes, it doesn't necessarily mean it's better. Okay? Because it's sometimes when a virus changes, it's like changing it from chocolate to vanilla. Okay? That's all you're really doing is you're changing the flavor. Is that going to make it more infectious? Well, not necessarily. Okay? And so there's still a lot of information that's being gathered about the newer variants of the SARS-CoV-2 virus and whether or not they're going to be more infectious. It looks as though from the early data that we see that both the both the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines, that they're effective against the new variants from what we've seen so far.
So I feel like I have to break away the stigma too. It's because the CDC, everyone's bringing up a document they had posted about the zombie apocalypse.
Wow.
Could you break that that thing that's going around? Because a lot of people really believe that we're about to turn into zombies.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. I haven't read that. I don't really look at that stuff because it's no, that's not gonna happen.
It's not gonna happen.
Don't be surprised. We've heard some things.
No, but they just, it's in their head.
Right.
Really.
They may have already, they just don't know it yet.
Would you
Right.
think that the coronavirus vaccine is stronger than a flu vaccine? Because I used to catch the flu every year and I had the shot.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's stronger. I'd say that it's different. It's different, right? And one of the things to keep in mind about the flu vaccine is that when they developed the flu vaccine, after they developed it and they began to put it into production, there are new varieties of the flu that may actually come out, or that may actually be prevalent in society. And so you may be just getting one of the new variants of the flu that just wasn't covered or a part of the flu vaccine. Yeah.
Because
But
I
people
used
are-
to catch the flu every,
Yeah.
and I had to like the
Yeah,
shot.
yeah.
I'd catch the flu anyway.
Yeah.
You did too.
But people are
Just
very
so we didn't
yeah.
have the flu.
But people are very excited about this mRNA technology because, I mean, essentially, if it turns out that one of these variants turns out to be much more infectious, I mean, you're talking about a 3-week turnaround time for Pfizer and Moderna to go in there and, you know, make some adjustments to the vaccine before they're like, okay, we have a solution. and then they can begin to put it into production. Okay? And again, it's not gonna be a 3-week turnaround time before it's like, okay, we're ready to start distributing it to the country and the world. But it will not take them very long to begin to make changes to the vaccine so that it is now effective against this particular variant of the virus.
So I have a question about individuals who contract coronavirus and have long-term symptoms and what
Yeah.
may be long-term effects
Yep.
and any research that's showing with that.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we have been seeing, and I mean, it runs the gambit, right, as far as the potential, because it's called, they've given it a term, it's called long COVID. And so these are for folks who have actually been, like you said, they've had COVID-19, and then they just have these residual effects long term. So some of the things that people are saying is, they don't recover their taste or their smell. Or they recover it, but it's very, very different. Or they have headaches, or they have brain fog, as other people have been talking about, or other forms of, cardiovascular related issues where some people actually have damage to the heart muscle. So there are lots of different things that can still remain, long term for people who've actually had COVID, and the young and the old alike. But again, it's those over 50, and I'm not saying that being over 50 is old, because I just
So as a person
Yeah.
under
that
50
category.
Yes.
is experiencing long-term effects.
Yeah, yeah.
like, the vaccine is huge.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely huge, right? I mean, because look, this is all about risk. I mean, this is all about mitigating risk. Okay, this is what this is really about. And I understand people having reservation about, going and get a vaccine because they think it's going to absolutely destroy their life. It's not going to happen. I mean, the likelihood of that happening is extraordinarily small. And like I said, I mean, my goodness, there are so many things that we do day in and day out that are so much more risky, okay, than actually going out and getting a vaccine.
So with boosters, I know you mentioned that earlier, but is there any way that, going further, that we can combine the vaccination, the COVID vaccination with the flu shots?
That I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that technology, because there are two different types of vaccines and the technology is different. I don't know. Yeah.
Any other questions?
That's all.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
We
No problem.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'll give a plug. So we are working with Louisiana, Department of Health and Hospitals, and Bring Back Louisiana. If anyone is not or has been averse to taking the vaccine, that maybe wants to rethink it, let Tyler or I know. We actually can help you get connected with getting scheduled. There is an event on May 1st, Saturday, May 1st, at the Grand Caillou Gym from noon to 6. They're actually giving food boxes if that's a little enticement for anybody, to be able to do that. They are giving the Moderna, and for anyone that potentially is walking in, I think they're gonna offer them Johnson & Johnson. And we have to understand too, with Johnson & Johnson, there are pockets of populations in this country that being able to appear on a schedule for two injections
It's a bit of a challenge.
is very challenging, and so Johnson & Johnson is certainly, I think, advantageous, particularly for the homeless population.
Yeah.
And so, thank y'all so much, and we appreciate it, and thank y'all.
Yeah, 'cause you see, I take a Mycelium shot once a month for my heart,
Mhm.
and I had to kinda work with the nurses to when I could take my first vaccine
Mhm.
and when I had to take my injection,
Yeah.
my Mycelium shot.
Gotcha.
'Cause I had to kinda like,
Stagger that.
yeah,
Yeah.
'cause the doctor had told me I had to wait 2 weeks after I
Mhm.
take my Mycelium shot
Right.
before I could